Nick Mohammed plays Nathan Shelley in the Emmy award-winning comedy series Ted Lasso. I'm Matt Noble of Gold Derby. And I just want to start, Nick, by asking, it doesn't look like Nate's having a whole bunch of fun at West Ham. How much fun were you having in season three?
Oh, lots of fun because it was, listen, it was very different. It felt like a very different role to, certainly season one. And, even season two, I know that, that sort of charted Nate's downfall, but he's out on his own, he's out on a whim and out on a limb, sorry. And it was fun because I was obviously getting to work with other kind of characters, Anthony Head playing Rupert, who's brilliant and so nice, and Eddie who plays Jade, and Spencer who plays Derek. It was great to have like lots of interactions with new people. But yeah, God, of course, I missed hanging out in the locker room and getting to be on the sidelines with Jason and Brendan and Brett. So I really tried to use as much of that feeling of like abandonment as part, in the performance of Nate, because I think he's going through a similar thing. He's sort of almost got imposter syndrome. He's in a completely different environment, and he's just facing a whole load of new sort of challenges. And so yeah, not in a pretentious way, but I tried to sort of channel as much of that kind of energy into the performance, because that is exactly where he finds himself at the start of this season.
Was that the biggest challenge for you, channeling that energy, or was there something else?
Oh no, there's definitely some. They've not been out yet, but like in episodes 10 and 12 in particular, there's some difficult scenes, and so they were genuinely difficult. Like, I mean, I can't go into too much detail because I don't want to spoil anything, but like
Yeah.
particularly the season finale, it happened to be that, and I don't know whether it was by design or fortuitous, that we ended up filming scenes, some of Nate's last scenes, on the very last day of the whole shoot. And bearing in mind, because we generally don't know if that is it, like
Mm.
that might be the end of the whole thing. So obviously there was a sort of element of it being kind of quite emotionally charged anyway, but because of the nature of the scene as well, it was meant to be an emotional scene, but it ended up just becoming quite real. Like so this really weird kind of blurring between sort of reality and what we're, and then stuff that we were shooting. So it was wonderful as a result of that, and it felt actually genuinely very cathartic, but really quite challenging as well. But I'll wait. We can speak about it once it's been out.
Yeah. Well, and whether it's the end or not, it has been talked about that there was a three-season story for the show that sort of gets rounded out at the end of this year, and the end of
Yeah.
this season. So, without spoiling how things end for Nate, how do you feel about that three-season arc that
I
Nathan had?
I think the writers have absolutely nailed it. I feel like and it's been so sort of seeded and drip fed, but so kind of sort of sensitively paced, I think, to kind of to make it feel real. Because I think that, the last thing that they would have wanted would it that it felt. I mean, it does feel like a heel turn when he betrays Ted at the end of season two, but it still needed to add up. It still needed to feel kind of that it hadn't just come absolutely out of nowhere. For Ted, it feels like it's come out of nowhere. But actually, all the sort of warning signs and the red flags are sort of there, charting Nate's downfall. And I think similarly now, and obviously we're not at the end of the season, so I can't speak too openly, but
Mm.
we are showing crack. Like I think even from episode one of season three in the press conference, we see these moments of kind of like just regret in Nate's eyes, of like what have I done? Like why am I here? You've and he is still the same guy. He still is riddled with all this insecurity and lacks this sort of self confidence and self worth. And that's playing out in slightly different ways. But we are seeing cracks begin to show. I think episode 9 has just been out, and it's the first time that we've seen him just like an act of. It's not a huge thing, but there's an act of defiance against Rupert. Like he's just not gone with him with these women to this bar. He's just gone
Mm.
back to jail. And just and you can see that we're building towards. So, of course, there's unfinished business between him and Ted and Richmond. Of course, like it'd be mad for them not to deal with it in some way. Whether it's a redemption thing is a whole
Yeah.
different matter, because not, in a way, that's not really even up to us. That's sort of up to an audience as to whether they feel
Mm.
Nate's done enough. For some people, they will always crave their pound of flesh because of what he did at the end of season two, and for others, they're like, yeah, I can see, that Jade is a force for good in his life. But, even then, Nate still hasn't accepted responsibility. Like I personally don't feel up until this point, Nate has done anything that would mean that he's fully redeemed. I don't think he's done enough yet.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think like an interesting thing with Nate this season is we have seen that arc from like the sort of biggest underdog at Richmond to this sort of, to be a bit reductive, like the villain or the foil, the antagonist of this season. But we still see like him being a very confused character in a lot of
Yeah,
ways. Like he is the villain that just being a real douchebag to Ted, and like got those great scenes like that. But we also see him struggling to ask a girl out at the restaurant, and all, so we see still a real innocence and vulnerability to him. At the same time, we see this real sort of sinister
yeah,
side and dark side of Nate. How do you
yeah.
find clarity in that confusion as an actor?
Um, I kind of question the writers a lot. Like, when we're going into scenes and we, often they'll rewrite on the day, and Jason's all over it, and particularly this season, really, you know, um, clear, wanting to kind of, find kind of clarity for whichever actor is doing something, because often is the case with Nate that he's saying or doing one thing, but actually inside we need to see it eating him up, or we need to see that it's not quite what he believes. Like, we need to show that confusion in him. So it is a challenge. You kind of walk a bit of a tightrope, actually, because on the one hand, Nate, even in like episode 1 of season 3, there's that bit where he's like reversing his little mini into the in between two really fancy cars, and that's a really kind of goofy, funny moment. I mean, that is just, it's almost like something out of Mr. Bean. It's quite, it's almost like physical comedy aspect
Yeah.
to it. And his sort of clumsiness is quite, physical. It's and that's been there from season 1, but then you then kind of cut to these quite raw emotional scenes of Nate. So, but it's all there in the writing. It's just about, I guess, sort of navigating it in the most realistic way possible, again, for it to feel authentic and believable, because you want people to feel invested, and you want people to feel like he's a real person. And I think that he is a real person in that he is to a large extent misunderstood. Like, I'm not condoning his actions, particularly like when he betrayed Ted and when he was inappropriate, made an inappropriate move on Keeley in season 2. Like, I can't, I'm not excusing that behavior, but he is misunderstood, and he doesn't believe he's a villain. Like, he doesn't.
Mm.
And even if he does have any kind of awareness that, okay, some of his actions might have been villainous, we're all allowed to make mistakes. I mean, if ever Ted Lasso taught us anything, it is about, we're allowed to make mistakes and we're allowed to find our way back. Like, that is the whole point of the show.
Mm.
And for Nate, without giving anything away, like, Nate represents that in a nutshell, but across 3 seasons. So it's really drawn out. But yeah, so yeah, we'll see where it's headed. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think like and look, we can make mistakes and all that sort of stuff. Like the whole first season, Rebecca was trying to sabotage the club and undermine Ted at every step of the way, and we found, like, at least in Ted's eyes and the team's eyes, she found redemption and
Yeah.
forgiveness there. And I think like with Nate, I
Jamie,
guess Jamie as well. Yeah, he was the big sort of antagonist of season 1 as well, a bully who's become sort of an advocate for the underdog and the Ted Lasso way. What do, like, I guess sort of partly with Nate, it's also like, as bad as some actions might be, he is, at least in his mind, justified them, which is why he
yeah.
doesn't see them as villainous. Like, he sort of, and I think he plays the victim a bit too. Like, sort of like, I'm entitled to this because of how I've been treated.
Yeah,
Which
completely. And there's a sad truth to that, not exclusively, but let's say someone who has been at the hands of a bully,
mm,
give them a bit of power, a bit of responsibility, and you see them emulating what was done to them because it's sort of all they know. And particularly with Nate, because he doesn't have a support network, he's been clearly mistreated by his dad and has a very toxic
mm,
relationship that never been able to do right in his dad's eyes. Ted coming along in his life filled a massive hole, and it empowered him in a brilliant way. When Ted then stepped away, because Ted in his way just thought, oh, well, Nate's fixed or whatever. um, Nate very quickly spiraled out of control again because he felt abandoned. He suddenly been given all this praise, and then it felt like it had been taken away, and so he started to, just question himself, and very quickly, because his mental health is not great, very quickly spiraled out of control and started lashing out in all the wrong directions, including stuff that was done to him, which he would never, have wanted previously. But it's no surprise that he lashes out at Colin and Will, the kit man, because that's who he was and how he feels like he was treated by these people. So he just takes it out on them.
We still see hints that he's sort of inspired by Ted and even trying to emulate Ted in certain areas, and particularly recently when he tried to get the Love Hounds
Oh God,
going
yeah,
at West Ham.
yeah, it was really fun. Yeah.
Yeah. How talk to us a bit about that scene, because that was like one of Nate's probably like funniest scenes of the
Yeah,
season.
it was really fun because actually there's something what I really liked about that was actually yes, because it was just genuinely played for laughs. Like there's so many funny lines in it, especially Yadran and Sam, who play Disco and Roger respectively, who are brilliant. And yeah, I mean some of their lines were great, like so funny. And but there's a such and actually I watched that episode back and it had not really dawned on me, even though I'd obviously read it, like it not dawned on me at like how well edited it was in terms of like we're literally cutting from the Diamond Dogs to then the Love Hounds. We're really seeing the kind of the chasm and the difference between these two support networks. I mean, Nate's one is just non-existent. I mean, it doesn't fire up at all, and Rupert doesn't show up. But it's so tragic. I mean, that's why Ted Lasso works so well, is because they can make us laugh but then instantly make us see the kind of the tragedy in that. When finally Disco and Roger leave the room, and I think Roger says, "Are we in trouble?" He's like, "No, you're not in trouble." But like Nate is just left alone again. Like he's just alone. He's so alone. Like I would say 60-70% of the shots of Nate is on his own, and it's really deliberate. Like it's so deliberate from the writer's part. To kind of create this feeling of isolation such that as an audience we kind of start to question whether we should forgive him. And I think that this, we talked about like Rebecca and Jamie having redemption arcs, but all Ted Lasso has always been about for me is always about our capacity for forgiveness. And it's actually really interesting, like how quickly we were able to forgive Rebecca,
Yeah.
and Jamie. But actually not so much Nate. Like I've noticed that, and possibly rightly so, he did overstep a mark. Maybe that we were really tested, and I think it's because we grew so fond of him in season one and really rooted for him. So the betrayal in season two felt like a real personal sort of knife in the back for so many of the fans of Ted Lasso that it was too much.
That's an interesting thing because, yeah, I guess with Rebecca and Jamie, the starting off point was the sort of ill
They were
intent of
already
those characters, and it was revealed that there was a real humanity behind that. Whereas Nate, we
yeah
saw that humanity up front. Yeah.
yeah got rid of it or kind of replaced it with ego and all the toxic stuff. And now we're kind of trying to then re-justify it with his insecurities re-emerging. So it's a really interesting, as an actor, it's like you kind of relish it as a challenge. And like I say, I feel like as writers of the show, they've just nailed it because it's a really, you don't see that much. It's a really dynamic journey, but you don't often see it in a supporting role. Your lead cast might kind of get those arcs, but not often a supporting role. Supporting roles are almost there to be constants to kind of keep your lead players in to sort of bounce off and change. But yeah, so it's been a real thrill to do that.
What have you learnt from this role and from this performance, Nick?
Oh God, I don't know. I feel like genuinely the show is a force for good. Like the show is there's so many brilliant life lessons that you can take from the show. Even the most obvious one, like be curious, not judgmental. I honestly try, and I hope I would have done it before Ted Lasso, but I do almost find myself sort of stopping myself and being like, just don't instantly just sort of judge or kind of think, oh well, that's that because of that. Just try and think, just try and put yourself in someone else's shoes, try and empathize more. And be curious about someone's behavior and not instantly write them off. And so undoubtedly I've taken sort of that feel it's such a positive message. But I mean, also the friendships I've made from, with the cast and the crew, obviously, we're a real family. And I don't know, I guess it's been really, this is the first role that I've done where I've had to, I guess, challenge myself. Like it's not always been, bringing out the kind of comedy in the role. Like, that was absolutely part of it. But, so much more in season two and season, certainly what's to come in season three ends up being quite emotional and quite raw. And that was a real test. And frankly, I just had a lot of support from Jason and all the creators who were always there to sort of help us sort of through the more kind of testing scenes.
Yeah. Is there a particular choice that you made in the final season that you're particularly proud of, or maybe that you thought was particularly an important choice for you to make?
um there's a physical choice, but you can't really know, you'll only notice it on the watch back, I think,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of his posture. I think like he bears a very heavy weight at the start of season three, does Nate, because he has to absolutely account for his action. There's a lot riding on him making it work for West Ham. So there was a very I kind of really consciously tried to kind of sort of physically show, as much as they were isolating him, I was trying to physically show this sort of weight, and he's often very hunched, often face down, because he's also on social media, like he's just preoccupied by what people are saying about him. So I tried to create this sort of, I guess, this like we're not getting too pretentious about it, like this almost sort of tension in him, and we start to see it lift. There's a moment where you see it lift in episode 4 because he interacts with Ted, but you won't notice that until you rewatch it. And then it's his interactions with Jade he just starts to open out, and you're also seeing it in his hair and his costume changes, very subtle changes to hair. We actually change wigs in episode 10, which is about to come. You won't know, you won't really know, but there's a very slight change. It's a softer look. There's a softer look to him. There's a kind of the choice of clothes, like the choice of what he wear. And obviously this isn't me, it's like costume department, but like it was all discussed. It was a big discussion that we had, and like what suits do to him, what kind of high turtlenecks do to his sort of posture and physicality. It just make him really uptight, actually. And a slow kind of derobing of Nate as we kind of getting into these last few episodes. So yeah, look out for
Oh
that.
yeah. I also love thinking about the show too, and thinking about Nate this season, like just some of his zingers against Ted, and just to think, boy, if an English Premier League coach who was running the top team in the league just started making fun of the team that's facing relegation, I feel like there'd be a lot of negative coverage around that particular coach. It's one thing for maybe an Arsenal and Liverpool to be exchanging
Yeah,
jabs and things like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
But I'm like, oh boy, yeah.
Yeah, it's horrible. I mean, well, I remember when I read that, because I remember because I knew what was, I've known broadly where Nate has been headed for a long time, but I remember really anxiously kind of anticipating episode 1 of season 3, thinking, I wonder what, I wonder, not as in I wonder how they're pacing it, basically.
Mm.
And then I read stuff in the press room, and I was like, oh no, they're really doubling down on Nate's behavior. I was like, oh crikey, yeah, I'm in it for the long haul. So yeah, but yeah, it's fun though. It's really
Yeah.
fun.
If you were to just sum up in one sentence, Nick, what the Ted Lasso experience has meant to you, what would you say?
Oh, the most overwhelmingly joyful roller coaster. Because there have been highs and did none of us could anticipate where it's sort of taken us, and I couldn't go because my daughter had just been born. But the fact that they went to the White House, or what
Yeah.
the idea that a show could suddenly inform mental health policy. I mean, God, it's mad, absolutely mad. But we're so great, we're so grateful for it. But it has been just the most joyful roller coaster. I've loved every minute.
Well, Nick, thanks so much for talking to us today. All the best of luck with the Emmy Awards this
Oh, thank
year.
you.
You sort of it's a team about an underdog football team, but you guys are sort of the West Ham of the Emmys, just coming in and
Oh,
winning them all.
there's a lot. Look, there's a lot of great shows out
Yeah,
there, a lot of great competition, and so we would never rest on our laurels.
yeah.
Of course, because we've been there before. there's that slight kind of like, oh, will it happen again? But none of us are really in it for that. At this point, we're just so grateful that
Yeah.
the show has resonated with people, and we're very grateful for the work. And so yeah.
People watch this interview can go to goldderby.com. And Nick, just thanks so much for your time. It's always so lovely to chat.
Thanks. Well, good to chat again, Matt.
Yeah.
Take care.